Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. The Department of Justice is appointing a special counsel for the Mar-a-Lago documents and the January 6 investigation into former President Trump. Here's what Attorney General Merrick Garland had to say today.
Based on recent developments, including the former president's announcement that he is a candidate for president in the next election, and the sitting president's stated intention to be a candidate as well, I have concluded that it is in the public interest to appoint a special counsel.
The investigations plan to gather more information and bring witnesses into a federal grand jury in the coming weeks. And the House GOP makes their first request for White House testimony after winning the majority. NTD's Iris Tao has more on their latest moves and the White House's response.
After seizing the majority, House GOP on Friday revealed their first targets of investigation from the White House. Congressman Jim Jordan and other Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee sent out a letter today demanding testimonies from White House officials. The subject is what they call misuse of federal counterterrorism resources to target concerned parents at school board meetings. The latest moves comes as House GOP has made clear that they'll also make it a priority to dig into President Biden's involvement in his son Hunter Biden's business affairs. And the White House today reacted to it this way.
So look, there's a little bit of interesting, kind of on-brand thinking here. They get the majority, and their top priority is actually not focusing on the American families, but focusing on the president's family.
The press secretary added that the White House is handling these threats by the GOP. But even upon being pressed, the White House press secretary would not comment on the legitimacy of those allegations of Biden's involvement in Hunter's business dealings. Instead, she went on to criticize Republicans.
The merits of any of these allegations? Because
I've been very
speak
clear.
To them, but not on camera.
I've been very clear. It's like, Republicans said that they were going to, during the midterms, they were going to fight inflation, right? They said.
Meanwhile, Congressman Jim Comer, the House Republican spearheading the investigation into the Biden family, told CNN that while he's prepared to subpoena Hunter Biden, he's not planning to issue one to President Joe Biden. Comer explained that trying to compel testimony from a sitting president is complicated, while noting the Republicans will take a different approach instead of sending out subpoenas like junk mail. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
Reactions are still pouring in after former President Trump announced his third run for president. Next, to discuss Trump's announcement as well as what's next in Congress, we sat down with Congressman Ralph Norman of South Carolina. Congressman Ralph Norman, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Glad to be with you, Steve.
Congressman, President Trump's announcement that he will seek office for a third time, trying. What stuck out in his speech? Anything in particular to you?
Yes, Steve. One thing that stuck out, a lot of things, but the first thing, his agenda is just what Americans want to hear. The country's in trouble, from inflation to rampant crime, to shortages, to our allies abandoning us because we've abandoned them. All the things that made him a successful president, despite all the things he overcame, he mentioned. And, none more important than closing the border. He was well on his way to doing that. I heard this morning it's going to be 18,000 a day coming into this country. We've got that we know of 5 billion, but all of that adds up to an agenda that I think people want to hear, regardless of the candidate. We know what Trump did, and none greater than what he did on the Supreme Court. He did everything he promised to do, and that was the Supreme Court alone was such a monumental plus for the country. But no, it wasn't, his announcement wasn't a surprise. People knew it. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see who all gets in and when.
One thing he proposed that caught a lot of people by surprise, something that would impact you directly, which is term limits for members of Congress. What was your reaction to that?
That's one of the greatest bills that we ought to vote on. Of course, my bill is that I've got over 100 co-signers on. 3 terms for House members, 2 terms for the Senate to go forward. In other words, if somebody has been there for 15 years, it goes forward. Let American people vote on it. I hear the things that people want, term limits, being in office too long. Go home and live under some of these laws that you've made. And American people are ready for it. And I'm happy he's supporting that.
Now, a lot of folks believe that Leader McCarthy will be the presumed Speaker of the House. Do you agree with that assessment?
Here's what happened. On the caucus did support overwhelmingly McCarthy. Now, there were 36 no votes. Andy Biggs is who I supported. And we've got the real test, Steve, comes on January 3rd when we're back in the chambers. We will vote one by one for who we'll support. Whoever is our next speaker has got to get 218 votes, which means 5 people can pretty much hold the process up until we get the speaker. And in my mind, whoever the speaker is, he's got to agree to this economic security. Our spending cannot continue. And whoever will agree to that. Now, I did ask McCarthy if he would support the 7-year plan, and he was not willing to. So we'll see how that goes. I know Andy Biggs will, but there are a host of other people that could be in play on January 3rd. We got 37 days to negotiate to see what the next speaker is not going to promise, but what are you going to do? That's the key to me.
Your colleagues, Jim Jordan and James Comer, just announcing in a press conference that there will be a slew of investigations. Is there anything in particular that you would like to see being dug out here?
That's the great thing about taking control. We will have honest investigations. We can subpoena every agency of that makes up our conference and makes up the House. Will be able to investigate and subpoena people and make them come. We haven't had that since Pelosi's been Speaker. No more than there's no more need than to get the Biden administration, Hunter Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and what the ties they have to China. China's our biggest threat, and if we don't find that out, which we will, and not only hold them accountable, but we've got to have teeth to what we find out, and let them get subpoenaed and let them not tell the truth and see what happens.
It sounds like China will be at the center of a lot of these investigations, whether it be the investigation into the origins of COVID-19, the Biden family's relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. How do you get both Republicans and Democrats on board with something that could be politicized?
Well, I think everybody knows, particularly on the Republican side, that China is our threat. To be dependent on a country that treats the Uyghurs, and treats the members of their members of the country, they're slaves to them. Now we're dependent on China for a lot of labor, but I think Americans now are willing to. We've got to get independent of China. We got to manufacture things that we're dependent on China for. That can't continue. And if the Biden administration if we find out that they're compromised, which on the hearing, on the report today that Jamie had, there's a lot of things that Hunter Biden particularly had ownership interest, equity interest in companies, oil companies that drill that China control. So it'll be a great time to find out, and I think it'll shock the American people what happens. But we can't just find it out. We got to prosecute it. We've got to make sure the consequences for them.
Congressman Ralph Norman, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Illegal immigration continues to be top of mind lately, but some are drawing attention to the U.S.'s legal immigration policies. Lawmakers spotlight how the Chinese Communist Party is taking advantage to influence America from the inside out. NTD's Melina Wisecup has the details.
Chinese subversion in the spotlight on Capitol Hill this week. FBI Director Christopher Wray telling lawmakers the popular Chinese-owned social media app TikTok is a national security concern.
The Chinese government could use it to control data collection on millions of users or control the recommendation algorithm, which could be used for influence operations if they so chose, or to control software on millions of devices.
TikTok has an office in California, and the DHS has approved nearly 600 H-1B visas for foreign individuals to work there. 300 TikTok and ByteDance employees are also current or former employees of Chinese state media.
You should delete it from your device. And even better, you should probably go out and buy a new device and not download TikTok on it.
Wow, it's that serious.
That would be my advice. But there is this nexus between China and our legal immigration system that China uses to exploit America's prosperity and put at risk our security.
Today, Senator Marco Rubio introduced a bill to ban the issuance of B-1 and B-2 non-immigrant visas to 93 million CCP members. Senator Cotton points to the fact that the CCP further takes advantage of our immigration law to send Chinese nationals to U.S. universities to train in research fields.
It just makes no sense to be training China's next generation of cutting-edge engineers or computer programmers or weapons developers at our own universities. That's because they're here on a mission. They're here to exploit wide gaps in security at our universities, to target programs and departments that have contracts with the Department of Defense.
Cotton explains that even if Chinese workers and students on visas don't intend to engage in espionage, they could be bullied into doing so by the CCP. And this is even more of a concern now that the CCP is operating a secret police station in New York City, a topic that took center stage in Thursday's Senate hearing.
What authority or jurisdiction does the CCP have in the U.S.? And I don't know which one wanted to testify.
Well, Senator, like you, I'm very concerned about this. We are aware of the existence of these stations, and we've had now a number of indictments that you may have seen of the Chinese engaging in uncoordinated quote-unquote law enforcement action right here in the United States, harassing, stalking, surveilling, blackmailing people who they just don't like or who disagree with the Xi regime.
Ray went on to say that the Chinese government has hired private investigators in the United States, and there have even been situations where electronic listening devices have been planted in Americans' cars. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries wants to be the next House Minority Leader for the Democrats. On Friday, the New York congressman announced his bid to lead the House Democratic Caucus. In a letter, Jeffries said, quote, "Our top non-governmental priority for the sake of the American people must be retaking the majority in November 2024. Congresswoman Catherine Clark of Massachusetts announced her bid for the House Minority Whip earlier on Friday. The position is number 2 in the Democratic Caucus. She's currently running unopposed in the November 30th leadership elections. Democrat candidate for Congress Adam Frisch has conceded to Representative Lauren Boebert in Colorado. The House race appears headed to a recount, but he said it's unlikely to change the outcome. Incumbent Boebert declared victory late on Thursday, also noting that a recount would not change much. She's leading Frisch by about 554 votes. That's according to results from Decision Desk. 5 counties still have a few ballots left out to count. And in Colorado, a recount is automatically triggered if the final margin is 0.5% or less. Frisch emphasized that he is not asking for the recount and told his supporters not to donate to his campaign. He said he was proud of a tight race, but, quote, Democrats have abandoned rural America and working class America. Boebert says she plans to send a legal team to monitor the likely recount. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.